Before 1947, there were many pilots who tried to fly as fast as they could at the greatest speed that they could to break through something known as the sound barrier. Pilots would get to this place and the plane would begin to shake uncontrollably, and it was frightening. Some pilots would back away, and some pilots even lost their lives. But on October 14th, 1947, Chuck Yeager is the one who pressed down on the thrust lever, going at an even greater speed, going through all that violent shaking. When it seemed like it was too much, he kept going and officially broke the sound barrier. And he got to this other side, if you will, and described it as quiet and serene and this awesome experience. And it revolutionized flying for all of us. And I think the experience of aging, both for people individually and collectively as a society, is a little bit like that experience. It's unknown. It's uncharted ground. Never before have so many people lived for so long with so much health and vitality. In the early 1900s, life expectancy was 47, and today it's 78 and going up. Many people today are living into their 80s and 90s and even 100. All of this shaking and bumping can be caused from physical health changes that appear, to changes in our roles and responsibilities, transitions with work and family, and even possibly, in the very later years, a change in our independence. This can create uncertainty and fear, and because of this, some people approach this second half of life and want to be in complete denial, right? They color their hair and they hide their wrinkles and they won't tell anybody what their age is. Pretend like it's not happening, right? And then there are those who may be going through these changes of advancing age and they approach it with bitterness and they get cranky and critical, feeling like they've earned the right to demand things go their way. But there are others, and I include myself in this group, that want to see this time in life as one of opportunity. That if we can somehow navigate our way through all the bumping and the shaking, that there's really something great about this particular season. Contrary to what society tends to communicate, the Bible speaks of old age as a good thing. In Genesis chapter 15, verse 15, it says, "You," speaking to Abram, "you, however, will go to your fathers in peace and be buried at a good old age." Proverbs 16:31 says, "Gray hair is a crown of splendor. It's attained by a righteous life." Proverbs 20:29 says, "The glory of young men is their strength. Gray hair is the splendor of the old." So the question becomes, how do we help people to open their eyes to the realities of getting older? Not ignoring the challenges, but navigating this time of life with courage so that we can see and realize all of the promise and possibility that resides during this time. One of the important first steps to seeing the opportunity is to recognize the diversity among the older adult population. When I tell people that I work in the field of gerontology, the study of aging, or that I work with older adults and older adult ministry, invariably there's someone who says to me, "I love visiting people in a nursing home," or "I used to take communion to people who couldn't get out of their homes." And I love hearing about their experiences serving in that way, but their initial response reminds me that often our minds go to one aspect of the aging experience, that being frailty, and we miss taking in the whole picture. There are at least 3 distinct groups that make up this stage that we call older adulthood. The first are frail older adults. I'm certainly not suggesting that you name a ministry and start advertising that this is for the frail elderly, but I want us to be aware of this season. Chronologically, these may be people that are 85 plus in age, though the number doesn't have to be what describes it. There are people who have experienced disease, disability that kind of put them in this category at a younger age. And then there are others who may be 90 or 95 years old, but don't really fit in this group, and that they are quite active, volunteering in the community, maybe even still working in some capacity. Who we are talking about are those whose physical health or even memory and cognitive health is really a factor in their day-to-day life. They may not be able to drive anymore. Maybe they can't navigate stairs, and it's even harder for them to get out of their home. They've experienced a lot of loss. In many cases, they are a widow, possibly living alone, or even in some kind of nursing home or assisted living. And these are people so worthy and in need of intentional ministry. The Bible talks about us caring for the orphan and the widow and the importance of this. And then there is a second set of older adults that if we were assigning numerical ages, we might identify this group as being 70 or 75 plus in age. There's a good chance this group is retired, though they still engage in a lot of activities. They may prefer to drive only in the daylight. They too are experiencing loss, perhaps the loss of going to a job every day, loss of friends, family members, even a spouse. And they may be really aware of now some physical changes in their own bodies. They're searching for purpose in their lives. And this age group and those older, the majority of them, not all of them, are willing to be identified as a senior adult. Whereas we know this third group doesn't like to be called a senior. These are people between the age of 55 to 70 or 75-ish. Phyllis Moen, a sociologist and researcher, says that those in this group are in a life stage called encore adulthood. They may be thinking about retirement or have retired. Maybe they're caring for an aging parent or raising or at least active in the lives of their grandkids. They are aware of their own aging and physical changes that are occurring, and they too are looking for meaning at this stage in their life. Each of these three stages, though they are distinctly different, bring about that shaking and bumping and all those unknowns. These are times of transition and change and loss, but also opportunity. So how do we help people navigate through these stages with courage? I have two things for you to consider, and I'm hoping you choose at least one of these to implement right away. The first is to help people in this stage of life look for the blessings. When you're teaching a lesson, or you're leading a small group, or preaching a sermon, or having conversation over coffee, ask people to think about specific things that are good about being 60 years old, or 70, or 80, or 90 years old. What are the blessings that come with being that particular age? Our society focuses so much on the challenges, on the negative things that occur as we get older. But what about the good things? I have a cartoon where an older married couple is looking at their wedding photo. And the husband says, "Wow, we were so young." And she says, "Yeah, and we were so skinny." And then he says, "And we were so poor." And a little silence goes by between them. And then he says, "Would you like to go back to the way things were back then?" And she says, "Just the skinny part." People need the reminder that every season of life has good parts and has challenges. Young people need to hear, what are the good things about getting older? What do they have to look forward to? Because there are things. When I've asked this question to older adults in all three of these groups we just mentioned, I hear responses like, more time to volunteer, my grandkids, being comfortable at this age, being just who I am, the time I have with God. And I even had a woman tell me, I don't have to shave my legs anymore. There is more and more credible research coming out that the practice of gratitude is beneficial for our lives, specifically for our brains. We know this from Scripture when we hear those verses like, give thanks in all circumstances. I don't think this necessarily means that we're thankful for Alzheimer's disease or for cancer. It doesn't mean we deny or don't talk about some of the really hard things that come with aging. But we look for those gifts around us in the midst of those circumstances. So find ways to help people meditate on and share those good things. And then a second thing, also supported in the research that helps people to adapt and cope with difficulties, including the difficulties of aging, is by finding ways to give. When we are generous in whatever way we can be, with our time, with our resources, with our experience, however we do it, when we are giving of ourselves, we do better with our own challenges. I know when we think about those three groups, what generosity looks like may be different. As people age and there are more and more physical limitations, they may begin to feel like they don't have anything to offer anymore. Perhaps you've even heard people say, I don't know why God keeps me alive. Or I can't do the things I used to be able to do. And then with good intention, we may say something like, well, you can still pray, but we say it as an afterthought. It's this thing that can be done after nothing else can be done. But what if we could reframe that? And we could empower people to truly believe what it says in James 5, that the prayers of a righteous man or woman are powerful and effective. What if every middle school student or high school student in your church that was going to church camp was individually matched with an older adult who was frail and maybe not even able to get out of their home very much anymore? And that adult would be praying for them every single day they were away at camp. What if they were given a schedule of their camper's day and the biblical themes that would be talked about? And what if when those campers returned, there was a face-to-face visit planned and they talked about what God had done that week and how their prayers had been answered? How meaningful would that be? Even with physical limitations, there are ways to encourage giving and serving. Another idea that I would suggest you consider, this one may be a little more geared towards that younger group I mentioned, the 50 to 70-year-old, is to do a one-day serving event. I know of a few churches who specifically with this age group would host these one-day standalone events. One church called it Done in a Day, or you could call it City Serve. And it was a dedicated time, maybe a Saturday morning or a full day on Saturday, where people in this age group worked on a project for the community, whether that be putting on a carnival for an underprivileged school or working with a homeless shelter or crisis pregnancy center or any other organization or need in the community. And then after it was over, these second half adults would come back to the church to have a cookout and debrief and be with one another. There's some really great things that come from this type of event. One, it responds to that desire that we know is in most older adults, and that is their desire to live with purpose. It also exposes and introduces them to efforts that are happening in their community where they might want to give more of their time. As leaders, we want to help people discover what their passion is and where they can give their time and talents at this stage in their life. So exposing them to different things through these one-time events gives them the opportunity for that one thing to click in their heart, and then they run with it. Short-term mission trips can work like this too. There was a couple who went on a mission trip, saw the needs, and then went back on their own for an entire month in order to set up a business so those people could have jobs that would sustain them and would last. This couple, in particular this businessman, found that passion because of the short-term opportunity, and they were generous with their lives. Proverbs 31 is known as the chapter in the Bible that speaks about the wife of noble character, but there is a nugget in this chapter that speaks to aging. Nestled in verse 25, it says, "She's clothed with strength and dignity. She can laugh at the days to come." Laughing or rejoicing about aging is not something that we're conditioned to do. In fact, we're mostly told to try to avoid it. But I picture this woman. Maybe she has a full head of gray hair, perhaps some pretty deep-set wrinkles, but her head is tilted back with this huge smile, and she's attractive, beautiful, really. The sound of her laughter drips with confidence in her God. She can smile at whatever is in her future because she knows him, and she's abiding in him. She trusts him. And the reality is that aging does cause people to go through bumps and transitions and challenges. It's scary. Our physical health eventually does decline. We experience loss and change. But as we think about ourselves and those that we lead, if we will keep looking for those blessings and look for ways to be generous and ultimately keep our eyes on the eternal, we too, I believe, can laugh and rejoice at the days to come.